I have made so many videos over the years being negative about Dead by Daylight, complaining about the state of the game or how something doesn't get fixed. And sometimes I might offer some feedback or hope for some solutions, but others I'm just completely hopeless and I'm just complaining. And these videos, believe it or not, they get thousands and thousands of views, sometimes millions of views. And you would think that as a content creator, that would make me happy that other people are coming to my video to validate their own thoughts and so on. But it really doesn't, because I don't want these videos to do well. I want Dead by Daylight to do well. I want this game to thrive. And this is what I was thinking while I was making the script and the bullet points for this video right now. This video is not a complaining video. It's not a rant video. It's not a everything is terrible video. It is a warning, a desperate cry for help. I was given early access to the PTB that we're all going to have access to in a few days of the Chorus of Saint chapter. This is the chapter that we all built together that has the Judgment Killer, which by the way looks really, really cool. Everything appearance-wise of the chapter is wonderful. Some of the perks are fun. The new changes that allow you to see a tutorial for each killer, chef's kiss. The balance changes and perk adjustments, very sorely needed. So great job on almost every single front. This really will be a really, really good chapter. But there's one thing that could ruin almost everything that I'm extremely worried about and that I'm going to try to explain. This new killer breaks a rule. One thing that no other killer pretty much has ever done before. And I think it could be a disaster. And I think it needs to be addressed right now, super, super early before it snowballs into a much bigger problem. So let me pull up something here, something that I've made up. We're going to call it the danger to distance graph, okay? Now, this is incredibly, incredibly intuitive. Most killers are more dangerous the closer they are to you. For a killer like Bubba, if you're very close, he can use his chainsaw to down you and you're going to die immediately. And if you're a little bit further, I mean, he might catch you, but the further you are, the more of a chance that he will bump into something or that you'll reach a pallet, so you're a little bit safer, right? Now, we have other killers, like for example, the nurse, that have an even larger range. She can go through walls, and there are a few factors at play, like line of sight, but the nurse is very, very dangerous for the first 20 meters, and after that, she's a little bit dangerous still, but maybe not as much. Other killers take this even further. For example, the Huntress is incredibly dangerous from up close because she can double tap you with her hatchet, but she still remains a little bit of a threat, even at a very, very, very long distance. And what you'll notice is that for the most part, killers are always at their strongest when they are very close to you. I've been trying to look for some exceptions, and there's really not that many. There are some killers like Hag or Trapper that obviously have to set up their power, but once they have set up, they generally are more dangerous when they're closer to you. The only killer or two that I can think violate this principle is someone like the Unknown or the Knight, where their power doesn't work super, super directly from up close. And if you're a few meters away from someone, you actually have a better shot at hitting them with your power and damaging them. But even then, for these killers, it's really not a big deal, because if you're really, really close, you can fake your power. And since you move pretty fast, you can just hit them with a basic attack. So for almost every single killer in the game, even the Unknown, even the Knight, you want to be as close as possible to the survivors, period. But then we have the Judgment, which as you can see has its own little roller coaster up and down graph. And what this means is that at a certain distance, your power is actually quite a useful thread. If you have a good line of sight of the survivor or auto reading on them through a wall, you can send your power. It's like a little slingshot that you aim, and there's a really good chance that you'll hit them. And even if you miss, it doesn't feel bad. It feels very similar to other existing powers like the Artist Birds. Completely fine. However, when the survivors are a little bit closer to you, you're going to slowly realize that it's almost impossible to hit them with your power in a direct, conventional way. Your power at a certain close distance doesn't work on the survivors because of things that we'll get into later. And it's very frustrating to come to this realization. But you might be thinking, well, if you're already a little close, why not just hold forward, get a little closer, and maybe use your power to zone, but then end up hitting them with your basic attack? Well, you're going to struggle to do that because this is one of the killers that moves at 110 movement speed, aka 4.4 meters a second, just like Hag, just like the Hunters. This is a killer that is slower than usual. And also, if you miss your power, you will be slowing yourself down additionally on top of that. So catching up to a survivor is quite the challenge. You have to use your power if you want to damage them consistently, and also because you have parts of your kit that are impossible to use if you're not using your special ability. If you do not use your Pillar of Light, you cannot send survivors into the Shadow Realm, into the Exile, and if you don't send them into Exile, you don't get the Empower status that makes your power more powerful. So you have to, for multiple reasons, use your power. You really need to get use of it. No matter what, if you don't, this killer is going to feel really, really subpar. And I know that many of you are probably very confused when you look at the footage, because it doesn't seem obvious that this power doesn't work at close range. You can see me charge it up and let it go, and it even goes on top of the survivor, but they don't take any damage. What exactly is going on here? Well, to understand it better, let's look at its evolution. Originally, in the very first prototype, this killer's power was actually a beam of light that emanated from the killer's point of view. This is kind of what the community voted for, but after a lot of back and forth and internal testing, they decided that this wasn't interactive or fun for both sides, and they scrapped the idea in favor of a pillar system, where the killer summons a pillar and then sends it over. I tested this early prototype as well with some of my friends right here, and in fact, we're seeing footage from Hens right now, and what you're going to notice is that the main thing that he looked to do is to spawn the pillar right on top of me as a survivor, and this was incredibly effective. The pillar was actually really wide as it spawned, so it could catch me, this is me, as I was dropping a pallet or doing some other action that I'm forced to do, and it was an incredibly powerful tool. It was super, super, super powerful and very oppressive in close range. But for some reason, they discarded this idea as well. The current version of the pillars do not damage when they spawn. They have to travel a little bit before they will actually damage a survivor. And whenever you put them in front of you, there is a very significant distance where the pillar simply will not damage someone at all. And there's something very unfortunate about this. With other killers like the Unknown, your projectile also doesn't damage a survivor unless it explodes. And if you hit a survivor with your projectile, you will actually hear a sound effect that is very distinct, and you also inflict them with a hinder status effect, which makes it a little bit easier to land the next one and keep up with the chase. So that's great for the Unknown, but this killer simply doesn't have that sort of feedback. If you spawn a pillar 0.1 meters too close to the survivor, you're not going to get killer instinct, they're not going to get hindered, you're not going to hear a sound effect. It will simply look as if you didn't do anything or if you miss completely. Even if you spawn a pillar from a far away distance and let it travel enough to do damage, sometimes you can miss by the smallest margin and it looks like you've been robbed. It feels so difficult to land this power. And as I said, doing it in front of you is literally impossible if you are looking in front. And that's the other thing that this killer violates. The other rule that almost every other killer follows. Most killers in the game, almost every single one that I can think of, have to look at the survivor and keep their camera locked onto the survivor. Sure, sometimes you might look a little bit to the side to set up your power and then maybe lock back, but you almost always keep the survivor somewhat in front of you. With this killer, if you want to hit someone really close to you, you generally have to flick your camera to the back, send your slingshot pillar a little bit far forward, and then flick back and aiming at the survivor's location to hit them if they have run in front of you. I'm going to tell you already, doing this on keyboard and mouse, which I'm used to, was difficult. I tried to do it on a controller, and it was devilishly impossible. Even if you change the sensitivity to be a little higher, which you can, it is so difficult. I genuinely feel so bad for controller players that will need to do this sort of incredibly super, super tight movement, super, super tight reaction. It is incredibly demanding. You need to look away from the survivor, but then look back and track them and make sure that you're super on point. And even then you might still miss. It is impossible to put into words how much more difficult this power is compared to anything else in the game in its current form. It generally is night and day. The skill floor, the basic need to play this killer is so much higher than anything else. It is generally baffling. And the craziest thing of it all is that there's a massive difference between the skill that you need to play as this killer and the skill that you need to play against it. When you play as this killer, as a new player, you're going to struggle a lot and you're going to need to do some crazy stunts and pull off some stupid slingshots to get one hit on a survivor. Meanwhile, as a survivor, you don't really need to do anything. If you wobble a little bit and move a little bit side to side, you're going to dodge most of the projectiles. You don't really need any new skill. You do the same thing that you do against artists and other killers that you're already familiar with, and you're probably going to be fine. And if on top of that, you also occasionally run into the killer when they're holding their power, you will realize that you're also pretty much invincible. At that distance, the power doesn't have enough space to actually damage you most of the time. Again, unless they do something crazy. And they are also completely unable to hit you with a basic attack for a very long time after using their power. Even if they cancel, they slow themselves down so much that you are completely safe. You can pre-drop pallets at a certain distance, be a little bit careful about snipes from afar, and you're going to be completely fine. And it's looking more and more likely to me that we're going to have another Kresu situation, maybe even worse than Kresu. If you didn't watch my video talking about it, long story short, this killer was very strong and quite easy to play once you understood a few things, and everybody ran with it. She was so oppressive, super popular, and then they made some changes that made her not so easy to play, not so intuitive, a little bit clunky even. And even though she was still very strong, now nobody wanted to play her. And right now the Kresu is sitting at a pick rate of less than 1% at times, which is really sad. I am very worried that this killer in this current state is going to be worse than Kresu, that in a couple months nobody will be playing them. So how do we fix that? How do we change that? Well, the first thing that I think is non-negotiable, that I think they absolutely should do no matter what, is better feedback about using your power. There is a brown add-on that gives you killer instant if you nearly miss your power. This should be base kit so that you know actually what is happening. And if you spawn your power too close to a survivor and it doesn't damage them, but it goes through them, you should hear a sound effect letting you know that the way that you didn't hit is because you were too close, so that you know exactly what happened. On top of that, I think this killer could also benefit from an unknown style debuff. If you hit a survivor with your power, you damage them, great. But if you miss, or if you spawn it on top of them, maybe instead of doing nothing, the power could give them a nasty hinder, or a nasty hinder and the killer instinct, something so that you know that you nearly miss, and to make the next hit a little easier, since this killer is 110, it probably wouldn't feel that oppressive. And as a survivor, if you nearly get hit and you get slowed down a bit, that doesn't feel so bad. I think the counterplay would still be fun. Some little bit of help when you miss, I think would be very welcome. And another thing that I think they should really consider doing is making this brown add-on base kit. This brown add-on is not for everyone. For players that want to explore the full skill ceiling of this character, they probably don't want it. But it is an add-on that makes this killer 10 times simpler. Whenever you send your pillar and it hits an obstacle like a wall or a big rock, it actually stops. It doesn't keep going. And you don't have such an immediate pressure to fling it at someone because it needs to be flung very quickly normally. You can actually take your time to aim, and it feels a lot similar to other killers that already exist, like Artist Birds. When I used this add-on, it shocked me so much how much easier it was to play. In my opinion, maybe not for high-level players, but for the general audiences, if this add-on is not made base kit right now, this killer is going to be too difficult and it's going to be too inaccessible. They should make this add-on base kit and possibly add some kind of switch, some kind of flip where you can press left control, the active ability button, whatever, and make it so that you can enable and disable this functionality, just like the Hellmaster can switch dock modes, right? She can search and she can hunt, similar thing. They should make it a base kit feature, and then I could actually see average players picking up this killer and doing relatively okay with it. I think that could be one of its saving graces. The rest of add-ons, by the way, are really interesting. We no longer have boring add-ons that block windows or that expose you for 60 seconds or that add mangle hemorrhage like every other add-on in history. We actually have add-ons that do a lot of wacky, crazy things, actually add percentages here and there. They change a lot of things and introduce a lot of different gameplay adjustments to find your style. I don't hate this idea, and I really commend the devs for being very creative with the add-ons and not just doing the basic stuff. That's awesome. I am a little bit worried that one of these add-ons will turn out to be the add-on that you have to, and then everybody's going to use it. So they will have to put a lot of work to make sure that none of these add-ons are the ones that feel necessary. We already saw that happen a bit with Jason, where one or two add-ons were so good that everybody ran them. And sometimes the devs nerf these add-ons, not necessarily because they are OP, but because every other add-on is so bad that people just flock to that. So that's another concern, but it's definitely minor. If they add a better feedback on misses, maybe a bit of a punishment for survivors if you miss, and they do this Brown Atom base kit, I think this killer will be at least salvageable, and we'll get to enjoy every other cool thing about it and every other cool thing about this chapter without the fear of this character becoming irrelevant in 2 months. I really hope that doesn't happen.